Miles Kelly. Yama-Kumar and the Healing Gift, an Indian legend. Take heed, live a good life, be kind and honest, be respectful to the gods and to each other. For then, when you pass from the bright land of the living into the dark underground kingdom of the dead, you will have no fear of facing the Lord of Death, Yama. When Yama examines your soul, he will smile upon you, whisper words of comfort, and send you on your way to one of the blessed joyful heavens. But if you spend your time on this earth doing evil, spreading misery and causing people pain, then prepare to grovel before Yama and quake with terror. He will banish you to the deepest dungeons of his realm for punishment, and he will harden his heart against your screams and begging, for it will be too late for repentance or forgiveness. Sometimes the just, fair Lord Yama wanders among the living, and observes how his future subjects are paving their way to his kingdom, with either good or bad deeds. Concealing his true nature behind a human disguise, no man would suspect that he is anything other than an ordinary man. Once, on one of Yama's journeys through the land of the living, he met a beautiful mortal woman and fell in love. The woman had no idea she was being wooed by the ruler of the underworld. Overcome by his charms, the unsuspecting woman became the wife of the Lord of Death. Yama was delighted, although his happiness proved to be short-lived. His new bride soon became difficult and quarrelsome. Yama was horrified to find himself nagged all day long. His wife made his life a misery. The couple were thrilled when a baby son came along, and they named him Yama-Kumar. However, to the proud father's dismay, his wife became even more bad-tempered and demanding. There came a day when the Lord of Death could stand his wife's scolding, screeching, shrieking voice no longer. He vanished, fleeing back to his underground realm. His wife was mystified, and determined to track her absconded husband down and make his life 100 times more miserable. Yama could not forget his little son, whom he loved very much. From the safety of his underground kingdom, he kept a careful eye on the boy and watched him as he grew up. He was dismayed to see that his wife was not looking after the boy as she should. She either ignored him or burdened him with boring, tedious chores. Yama-Kumar grew up without learning anything. By the time he was a young man, his father was very concerned that he had no way of making a living for himself. The ruler of the underworld decided he would help his son, and one night he appeared to Yama-Kumar in a dream. "Do not be afraid," he whispered into Yama-Kumar's sleeping mind. "I am the Lord of Death, but I am also your father. I want to give you a very special gift. Work hard to become a doctor, learning all about medicinal herbs and plants, and I will bestow on you the power of healing. You will be able to cure anyone who is ill, unless you see me sitting at your patient's head, waiting to catch their soul, for this will mean that they will surely die." When Yama-Kumar woke up, he was full of excitement. Sure enough, he did as his father instructed, and threw himself into studying medicine. He was so keen that he became a doctor in half the usual time. Yama-Kumar quickly discovered that the Lord of Death kept his promise. He seemed to be able to cure anyone, no matter how gravely ill they were, no matter how unusual the problem was. Even if other doctors declared the patient a hopeless case, Yama-Kumar could cure them, unless, of course, he saw his father sitting grimly at the patient's head. Yama-Kumar became famous far and wide, and was soon known as the greatest doctor in the land. After some years, Yama-Kumar was called to the royal palace itself. The king and queen's beloved daughter had fell gravely ill, and now they feared she was dying. As Yama-Kumar entered the patient's bedroom, his heart sank. There was the shadowy figure of his father, sitting at her head. Yama-Kumar looked at the beautiful young princess lying in front of him, and listened to the sobbing of the king and queen, and all the courtiers who loved her very much. He bowed his head and prayed, pleading with his father not to take her. The Lord of Death sighed. "She can have 3 days more, my son," he said, and faded silently away. The king and queen had, of course, seen and heard nothing. "Take heart," Yama-Kumar told them. "I cannot promise, but I am going to do my very best to heal your daughter." For 2 days and nights he sat at the pale girl's bedside, racking his brains to come up with a plan to save her. On the 3rd day, Yama-Kumar finally saw the shape of his father looming into view before him. "Beware, father," he cried, before the Lord of Death could take the princess. "Allow this woman to live to a ripe old age, or I shall tell my mother who you really are and where to find you." Yama stopped and thought about the terrible threat. A cold shiver ran down his spine. "So be it, my son," he nodded, and disappeared hastily into the shadows. Yama-Kumar immediately set about curing the princess with his herbs and medicines. By the time she was well again, they had fallen deeply in love. The king and queen were delighted to marry their daughter to the talented young doctor who had saved their life. And Yama-Kumar and the princess lived happily ever after.